And before we start, I'm going to just talk for a few minutes, do a short introduction, and maybe some of this is going to embarrass Jimmy, but I think it's okay. So anyway, 2 years ago, I went to Amsterdam, and I had a beautiful, beautiful discussion for a podcast with Jimmy. And I asked him something, I asked him a question, and I saw a visible disappointment on his face when he said, "It's a good question. I have been asked this before." And after that, and before that as well, I have noticed that Jimmy really enjoys being challenged when he's being questioned. And oftentimes when he gets questions that he has answered before, he tries to be as polite as possible, but you can feel that he would rather maybe not answer it because he has already answered it before. The reason why I'm saying this is because I felt it in my soul very strongly, and because we would like this to be a more communal experience. So if anybody has anything interesting to ask, you can raise your hand, and maybe we have a way to get a mic to you and you can ask a question. But I'm just going to say, if maybe let's try to make those questions, if you have any, maybe as challenging as possible. And if you have very basic questions about where Jim is from, how did he start, what kind of a camera he uses, there are a million videos, talks on the internet, TED Talks, other interviews, or talks that he made on Instagram Live last year that can be found on YouTube, where he answers all of those questions. So perhaps if you want to know those things, you can find them in many, many places. But today, let's try to ask challenging, interesting, profound questions, perhaps. And this way we can maybe make and create something new, something interesting, something one of a kind. And it can be a more interesting and beautiful evening for all of us. How does that sound? Great. How does that sound to you, Jimmy?
Exciting.
Wonderful.
Another adventure. Yeah, it's difficult to see you in the audience with the lights, so we're going to have to find a way that...
Can we maybe just put a little bit of light onto the public as well? Yeah.
And if you want to participate, sort of wave like you're landing an aircraft.
Exactly, or make a sound, or whatever.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So I'm going to go back to 2 years ago, because it was almost exactly 2 years ago when I visited you. And you said something, and this is not going to be a direct quote, but we had just had first lockdowns. They had just ended. We were enjoying the summer. And you said something along the lines of, sadly, this 2 or 3 months, we're not going to be able to learn the lesson that we need to learn. We would need for this to last for 2 years, and the Third World War to start for us to learn our lesson. Now, 2 years has passed, and this, I feel like, was quite a profound statement that you made. Within those 2 years, what have we learned?
First of all, good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. Good question. What have we learned? Perhaps I'll apply it more to myself. I can't necessarily presume to understand what you have or you haven't learned. I said something very similar to that in Amsterdam. I don't think I mentioned a third world war. If I did, I was a little bit naive. But hey, I believe very strongly that as human beings, for us to make a profound change, either as an individual or as a group as a whole, we have to hurt. There has to be pain. I'm generally a very positive person. I aspire to be a very healthy person physically and mentally, but I also believe in that the bipolarity of happy and healthy, in the darkness of pain, to aspire to keep that balance. The world is in a very vulnerable place at the moment, and we all know that. We're very aware of it. It's becoming more and more prevalent in our daily lives. And to do something profound about it, we should be afraid. We should be in pain. We should be anxious. And I don't believe what happened in the last 2 years was scary enough for us to actually be proactive and make the profound changes that need to be made. I speak from personal experience insofar as I haven't gone through a pandemic before, and I'm not presuming that I would understand how that works, but having gone through something in my life as an individual that was very painful a number of decades ago, that forced me to change, forced me to evolve, forced me to learn from out a very vulnerable place, which has provided me with a substantial amount of personal understanding, which makes my life a very rich experience, a very valuable experience, and an experience I want to sustain for as long as possible. I don't believe in an afterlife, and I will never live forever and ever, but I would love to aspire to live, I'm 54, for another 54 years. That's not technically possible. If one can get into that space of connection, of wealth, of happiness, I believe we as a whole, as human beings, will then start making the changes that need to be made. But first you have to be afraid. First you have to hurt. First you have to be deeply scarred to come out of that metaphoric lockdown and make a difference. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
Yeah, but again, I have to be very careful not to be presumptuous for the planet as a whole, but I'm sort of running it parallel to my own personal journey, and very much with what I do within my art, within my creativity, runs very much parallel to that. Looking for a different way of being, looking for a different connection, and looking for a different sustainable way of enabling this life to last as long as possible, and to also maybe leave a little bit of a legacy. I think that's also very important. There'll be, hopefully, fingers crossed, touch wood, a multitude of generations after me and after us. And I would love to leave a little bit of a message behind, a positive message for them to also be deeply connected for a sustainable human journey. And this is without being religious in any way. I'm sort of an animist, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
Beautiful. Would you maybe like to take us through what have you been doing for the past 2 years?
I had, again, this is not very politically correct, but I'm going to say it anyway. The beginning of the pandemic in March 2020, I was in Mongolia working on an extension of my work. We had a little bit of a lockdown there. We didn't take it very seriously. I came back to the Netherlands, everything shut down. I had just resolved a number of quite profound issues in my life prior to that lockdown, and that was an extended lockdown. So I was actually feeling quite relieved. I wasn't stuck at home with 3 young kids, so I was quite free. But whereas the rest of the world seemed to be looking and waking up in the morning with an enormous amount of fear and lack of possibilities, I saw the inverse. Through the peace, the quiet, the spring, the freedom that I had found by solving a number of quite complicated issues, I only saw possibility. I got into that positive space because it was very quiet. It gave me time to reflect. It gave me time to look at all the ingredients of my life. And as a result of that, I realized that I see an enormous amount of potential in the world, potential in myself and potential in the human beings around me. And that I have, and if I'm going off on a monologue, tell me to shut up, but it's an organic answer. I've been looking the whole of my life for a place to feel safe, for a place to feel loved, perhaps, and to give love to. And that's the Netherlands. I've lived in the Netherlands since I was 23. I landed there by default. I ran away from my past. But it's only now that I begin to understand what I was running away from and what I needed to run to. The beginning of the pandemic gave me the peace, the quiet to understand that, address it. And as a result, rather than complaining and saying I couldn't travel, I couldn't fly, I couldn't disappear off to all the indigenous cultures and communities in the world, I actually realized that there was extraordinarily rich content on my own doorstep in the Netherlands. Now, the Netherlands is as big as Estonia, 17 million people, a few more. a third of the Netherlands is underwater, and it's perceived to be a very homogeneous contemporary culture where there's not a lot of cultural wealth in it. Because I was in a positive place and better understood what I wanted to look for and connect with, I didn't discover anything, but I found and have made a document of the Dutch indigenous culture, heritage. It's called the Klederdrag. So in the autumn of this year, we're launching a very big book, as big as all the books I've ever made before, on Holland. So that's what I did. So rather than sitting at home crying, worrying about my hair and my makeup, and I'm being very facetious, I spent the whole time on my bicycle, cycling around the Netherlands with my small team, connecting with an extraordinarily beautiful country, a beautiful culture that is outrageously diverse and as beautiful ethnically, culturally as Papua New Guinea or Mongolia or Venezuela. So that's what I've been doing.
Now, if I...
So to answer, very productive.
If I hadn't had the conversation with you 2 years ago, I would now ask you a certain question, but because I did ask you something, which was the question that I referred to earlier, where you said that you have been asked this before. So what I asked you 2 years ago was that of all the tribes, all the different peoples that you have met, has there been anyone that you felt like a special connection to, or has there been anyone whose way of life has appealed to you the most? And you answered it in a very beautiful way, basically saying that no, we're all the same on the inside. And every time I've thought about you, which has been quite many times over the past 2 years, because I find you a very beautiful human being, I've come to this because whenever something goes a bit wrong, you remember it, right? And so I've pondered it for 2 years. And today, just a few hours ago, I was sitting down and I realized something, and it might be completely my fantasy, but it made poetic sense to me. And so you have on a number of occasions mentioned how you lost all of your hair as a 16-year-old. Whenever we visit other cultures, we see all their appearances as being different, right? And because we're different, it's easy to feel different as well. But there is something very interesting about clothing and ornaments, which is that their main purpose is to protect us, right? Protect us from the weather, from animals, whatever, right? And but at the same time that they protect us, they also show us, because what we choose to wear says a lot about who we are, how we want to present ourselves, and so on and so forth, right? And now, you having lost all of your hair, which makes every human being unique and gives them particularities and specifics, is something which in some way, I feel like, in a poetic way, has made you much more maybe like an open vessel to see every culture as the same, because all the differentiations that everyone else has, you lost all of them. So you can basically maybe fit in much more easily than anyone else would. Do you kind of see?
I get it. But the losing of the hair is only the tip of the iceberg to the real journey. It's an aesthetic, but it's the journey from within, what you feel. I don't know whether, I'll put it a little bit into context. Maybe some of you know, it's online. When I was between the ages of 0 and 7, I traveled extensively around the world. My father was a geologist, so I lived on almost every single continent. I had a very feral childhood, so I was wild. Then they sent me, looking at the guy over there from the UK, to an English boarding school between the age of 7 and 17. I was 7 years old. I went on my own to an institution that had 1,000 boys and up to 400 Catholic Jesuit priests. I arrived very naive, very open, very trusting, very loving, and a number of those priests severely sexually abused us as kids between the ages of 7 and 9. It's quite, nowadays you hear it's unfortunately quite common, it was quite common, but it becomes a secret, it gets buried. You can't talk about it, you can't define it as a 7 and 8-year-old. So you put it into a bunker and put concrete over it. So what happened was I evolved to become a young man at the age of 16. This is why I'm fascinated with rituals of the transition from childhood to adulthood. And a number of elements all coincided. I had cerebral malaria. I came back from West Africa, so I was very ill. I was given the wrong antibiotics by one of these priests, and a tsunami of stress, this secret I was holding that I'd been very badly sexually abused. So everything combined was this catalyst for one night me losing my hair. So you wake up in the morning, and it's alopecia totalis, so it's basically, the nervous system lets go and says goodbye. As you can see, it hasn't grown back. Best thing ever, I love not having hair, but when I was 16, it was quite painful. But what happened was, you have to redefine who you are. You're 16, you look in the mirror, I was a very, very sensitive child, very creative, very androgynous, elements of autism, so a whole load of interesting issues, and that idea of having your hair taken away, you become naked. You become utterly, utterly, utterly naked. There's no definition of your aesthetic. And I became ostracized. I ostracized myself. And it was a case of, I felt ugly because of what had happened to me as a small child, but it was my secret. Nobody knew. And all of a sudden, I now looked ugly, metaphorically ugly. So my secret is out. So I can't hide behind that feeling. Does that make sense? So that very, very awkward feeling of loathing my body, that whole idea that this vessel that I'm carrying, I want to disconnect with. I don't want to be part of it because of what I'd experienced. Now that loathing, does everybody follow the word loathing? It's you want to vomit with how much you hate it. People can see I don't like myself because of the way I look. This is what I told myself as a teenager. So this was the tipping point. It was an amazing moment of redefinition. What do you choose to do? You either go into a lockdown and hide forever and ever and ever, or you redefine yourself, you redefine your life, you go on a new adventure. But that venture is very lonely. That venture is very, very personal, but I have to redefine my place on this planet, and in this life I consciously choose to live. But it's going to be fucking hard work because I don't like myself. I don't like the way I look. I don't like the way I think. And everybody around me tells me the same. And that became the adventure, which I'm still on today. So it is not the aesthetic of the hair. It's the effort and the investment you put in to redefine, I want to live. I want to stand. I want to own the space I'm in. And I'm happy with this human being. Does that make sense? The camera and the journeys and the connections and the meetings is all a sort of the packaging for that understanding. The camera is a mirror. And as I've organically learned, the more I invest in somebody else, the more I am on my knees and I look up and go, wow, you're amazing. You are beautiful. You are strong. You're intelligent. You're everything I aspire to be. That's in the making of the picture. The hope is that it becomes reciprocal and reflects back on me. And I can end up feeling the same as well. So it's about this balancing between others. So every single human being I meet, I want to invest in because I want some of that positivity to reflect and mirror back on me and how I feel. Yeah? So the boldness, the aesthetic, that's just the tip of this very, very complex human journey of my definition, of my exploration of who I am, what I am. And then if I choose to live this life in a healthy, happy way, maybe I can leave at the end of it a tiny little bit of a legacy to explain to people what I discovered. So I'm not an anthropologist, I'm not a journalist, I'm not counting any tribes. I have very little knowledge. I speak 1.5 languages. But this organic journey of redefinition of who I am, to dare to look in a mirror, that's quite interesting. But it doesn't really have a label or a badge or a title or a qualification. But it's very complicated and very exciting because it's very vulnerable. Yeah. And that vulnerability is what propels one to discover the other. And then, interestingly, you find organic ways of becoming very, 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 very close to other human beings. Because what do I want? I just want to be loved. That's all. I want to go back to that little boy who was 7, who stood there in his shorts with these big eyes and said, I love the world, I've seen every culture, everything's amazing, as every 7-year-old child does. And I want to go back to that moment of trust, that moment of possibility, that moment of opening the door of curiosity. And that's what I'm trying to redefine and bring into my middle-aged self. The mediums that I use is purely the icing on the cake for that deeper understanding. And that excuse to carry on exploring, carry on questioning, carry on opening the door, to better understand who am I, how do you see me, how do you define me? And when you go completely off grid and you connect with a community who's, you talk about Papua New Guinea, where I'm extremely fond of. There are 7,000 official languages in the world, and in Papua New Guinea there are 1,000 of the 7,000. So a multitude of cultures that are so different from us. But to connect with a community whereby they won't let you go, they hold you so tightly because of the meeting, and it's the most thrilling adventure there is. I can't put it into words, that there are human beings so far away, so remote, so different, so want me to be part of them. It's like being reborn, yeah. And that feeling of take me, metaphorically take me, hold me, tell me I'm valuable, tell me I have a purpose, tell me I'm okay. And that's what it's about, yeah.
Wonderful. In your TED Talks, you have talked a lot about beauty. How would you say that the traditional peoples see beauty and themselves as beautiful differently from our culture?
Good question. Again, this is very an organic answer. It's not scientific. I haven't studied. There's no thesis. There's no book. Their definition of beauty is a layered definition, and it's being connected with their physicality, their community, traditions that tell a story, and those that are all aligned with the natural world. So it's a whole palette of connection. If all those elements are aligned correctly, then one feels beautiful. But you have to work very hard at it. You have to work hard by understanding your traditions, understanding your culture, understanding the stories that it tells. If you're going to tattoo yourself, you don't just walk into a shop because you fancy a tattoo. You have to earn the tattoo. It has to be an investment within the community. If you're to enable the nature around you to be sustainable, you have to invest in it. You have to be humble. You have to wake up in the morning and honor it. When you honor it and one another and yourself, you can align a whole multitude of emotions and end up feeling beautiful. We, I would argue, in the developed, spoilt, over-consumed, overproduced Western world, we've become very lazy. We're becoming so lazy, we're not even bothering with this anymore. We're going online and we're creating an alter ego in what will be potentially the metaverse. Trust me, you will never feel beautiful if you superficially want to find that wealth in that way.
So
it's a very, very, very deep investment that's required. Yeah.
So what you're saying, if I'm understanding you correctly, is that in our culture, there hasn't been enough of a sacrifice for us to feel beautiful, because it requires more than just aesthetics.
Again, this is organic. We are finding shortcuts to that answer. More and more and more and more and more shortcuts. Now all we need is a filter. Superficially, you will find an aesthetic and a beauty, but you won't feel it. To feel it is a deep investment. I remember when just prior to the pandemic, I was revisiting a lot of the communities I've worked with my book, their pictures. I was about to say, they're not my pictures, they're their pictures. And I would often sit, and I would take, this time, translators with me, and they were so uninterested. They were sort of, and I said, well, this is what, and I said, well, okay, this is how you see us, but we don't need you to tell us how we see us. We know how we feel because this is how we see ourselves. So uninterested in that existential experience of seeing a picture. I don't need a picture to tell me who I am or what I am or how I look like. I'm busy with feeling it. That's the big difference. We base our aesthetic and our beauty on a picture, as opposed to disconnecting from a mirror, from a camera, from all that form of documentation, and actually feeling beautiful.
What has helped you to feel beautiful in that way?
The feeling of health, the feeling of physical possibility, the feeling of being physically connected with the earth, and that gives me possibilities of exploration, but it's also mental exploration. It's not going from A to B. And the more those possibilities open, the wealthier I become in experience and in time and in possibility. And that creates a feeling of beauty. Because the beauty is more of an existential experience as opposed to how I look in the mirror. The more one feels beautiful, the more energy one has, the more one aspires to carry on living in a sustainable way.
Beautiful.
If that makes sense. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did everybody hear that?
I'll just repeat it. Basically, what's your name, sorry? Rita. So what Rita has asked is that to the traditional people, Papua New Guinea, for example, do they invest as much time as we do into looking beautiful? Was that basically the question? No.
They unconsciously do it anyway. In Dutch, you say this is an onbewust. They're not busy. It just is a layer of their whole experience and their daily existence. Of course, it can't come easily. It's a daily. It's not something you buy. It's not something you earn. It's a whole daily. I use it. This is a good example. This is a childish metaphor, but I'm going to share it with you. This is the best way to explain it. I believe, and again, I'm speaking broadly. Forgive me, but we're just late. I feel we're a lot lazier. We're all born as a feather. Okay, I'm going to go off on a segue. Yeah, a feather. Think Forrest Gump. That idea at the beginning of the feather flying. Prior to the age of 7 or 8, as human beings, wherever we are on the planet, we're that feather. That feather is a metaphor of beauty, of aesthetic, of, most importantly, lightness of being. The feather is a wing. When a feather is groomed, when a feather is loved, the thousands of hairs that make up that wing fly with zero effort. They just catch the ambient light. That's the possibility of life. That's the infinite horizons that childhood has. My feather, talk about myself, was thrown on the floor and trodden on very badly for 2 years. So it became crumpled and broken, but I was still a feather. I organically, through circumstance, decided to pick up the feather and try and repair it. But I didn't think I could repair it tomorrow, or I could buy a solution. I organically realized it's going to be a very, very, very long journey. But maybe the journey is what is exciting. The journey is the thrill. let's see how far I can bring that feather back to the state that it was when I was 7 years old. So, for however many years, every morning I wake up and I get one hair and I try and straighten it. Gradually, after however many years, at the age of 54, slowly that feather, through mirrored experience with indigenous cultures, is beginning to catch the air and beginning to fly again. So I'm beginning to feel the possibilities of childhood, the infinite horizons, but with the relative wisdom as somebody who's middle-aged. This is what I've learned from the communities. Every day is a ritual. Every day is a sacrifice. Every day you have to work on it. It's not something you can buy or delegate. It's your job. It's what you have to do. But you have to wake up early. You have to wake up before the sun rises, even here in the summer months, and groom the environment around you, respect it. And I'm being melodramatic for the sake of telling a story. And when that's all in order, the day can begin. And every day is special, and every day is an honor, and every day is a privilege to be here. And if you think like that and believe like that, slowly you start investing all these layers. So when I'm spending considerable amounts of time living within a community, this is how their days begin. They work with the natural environment, the natural light, the natural climate. And it's all about a ritual. It's all about a homage to their environment, one another and themselves. And then they have all these layers. We've sort of compressed it all, I think. This is an organic interpretation of it. We just want a quick fix. We want a quick solution. We take a pill, we go online, we connect, I believe it's very, very difficult to have that wealth of being without investing in such a... but it's hard work. But it shouldn't be described as hard work. It should just be one state of being. Yeah. And I think, it can be, there's elements of meditation, but it should be built into your whole daily existence. Yeah.
I'll just so that we have it on the recording as well. So what Rita said, and now I think I understood it correctly, the question was, like, do the indigenous people have to give a lot of effort for there to be harmony? That was the question, right? And what you've said, and I'll try to say it in a slightly different way, is that once you've done something for 10,000 years, then it isn't effort per se anymore because you're so used to doing it, essentially, right?
Yeah.
And one of the theories of, for example, why there are so many religious texts and so many interpretations of religious texts is that religions largely grew out of societies becoming too big for there to be like a natural way of living, and so they had to start writing things down and things down and things down, like more and more and more. But if you're in a small society that hasn't changed for thousands of years, then you don't have to have this knowledge because you're living it, you're embodying it.
And the majority of these communities throughout the world are essentially, to all intents and purposes, animists. So their church is the natural world. And I'm simplifying it. And I believe in the developed world, that's what we should start reapplying. We talk about sustainability and about saving the planet. But if we don't respect the world that we live on as a church and give it this dignity, this time, this attention of love and care, it will get rid of us. It really will get rid of us. And that's why all these indigenous communities, it's so important we understand them. It's so important we respect them, learn from them, watch them, listen to them, because they are living as best as they can in a very humble, this is also very important, humble, sustainable way. And this is bridging back to the story of childhood. By losing my hair, by connecting with that experience of child abuse, I had to become humble. I had to go back to the very beginning. I had to dissect my being, my everything, and look at all the things and go, I'm nothing. I never will be anything. And I have to start right at the bottom and remain there in that humility. And in this process, I can connect. When one doesn't go through that pain, talking about at the beginning of the conversation, we let the ego inflate. And that's the whole illness of contemporary human beings. And for certain individuals, that ego gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and totally disconnects with the humility of what it is to be a fragile, fallible human being, and believe that we're bigger and more important than the world that we live on. And by spending time with indigenous, they're the inverse of this. Total inverse. It's total humility. It's fragility. It's incredibly beautiful. This whole idea, you segue into the aesthetic. It's all about this decoration, often about feathers and about details. And everything's so delicate, so beautiful, so fragile, so finite. And that's how they connect to it. Yeah. We just walk into a shop and slash a credit card and, yeah. Yeah, but okay. There's a very. Did everybody hear the question? Okay, I have a nice anecdote about this. I think this is so fun. This for me is very clear. You're right. The pictures I make are very subjective. They're very romantic. They're very idealistic. They're very one moment. I try to extend that moment as long as possible because I'm now using analog cameras with film, but it's still a 3-second moment. But they're all true. But it's my truth. It's my perspective. But it is what's there. But it illustrates what I see and what I feel. About 4 years ago, I was in Vanuatu, the 83 islands in the Pacific, and they're culturally very rich and very diverse and relatively unconnected to the natural world. And I was at a festival on the main island, and I was taking some pictures, and somebody came up and put their hand on my shoulder. There were 3 young Dutch adults, early 20s, and they said, hey, you're Jimmy. I said, oh, yeah. The reason we are in Vanuatu is because of you. I said, oh, wow, because of the pictures you make. I said, oh, that's great. He said, but we have something to share with you. Our father paid for us to come here, and he's over there, but he hates you. And they started to laugh, and I thought, okay, there's something going on here. I said, you have to come and surprise him. He will not believe that the reason we are here is you, and we found you here. Come with us. So I walked with them. They were giggling because they knew something was going to happen. And then they, bop, and they put his hand on it. He turned around and he looked at me, and all the blood came out of his face. And he was he wanted to hit me, hug me, spit on me, and he was completely, in Dutch, in the war, confused. And what was very interesting was he'd spent the last 2 weeks cursing me. Oh, fucking Jimmy. Blah, 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 blah. The journey he was on did not look like the pictures Jimmy made. And he had the book with him, and he went to every location. He stood on the location and says, it doesn't look like this, not once. And he wanted his money back. Now, I don't run a travel organization. I'm not a marketing guru. I just make that. And it turned out, and we sat down, and we had a long conversation that lasted 2 days. And he was a very happy, sad, frustrated, bitter, angry, unhealthy middle-aged man. And he had accumulated a lot of material wealth, and he decided he could buy anything. And he was going to buy a Jimmy experience. And he said to his kids, where would you go where Jimmy went? Vanuatu. We're going to go there. We're going to go there business class. And we're going to have exactly the experience Jimmy had. And when he arrived, it wasn't. And the conclusion was, cutting a long story very short, because he was in such a negative place, I could have put him in Shangri-La, in Nirvana, wherever, and it would have been an ugly experience, because he himself felt ugly and unhealthy. So the moral of the story is that the those pictures, again, are very subjective, but it just illustrates my state of mind. And it's very important to understand how I got into that place. When I visit these people in these communities, in these environments, I see it in an extraordinarily powerful, inspiring way. Not too dissimilar to the way I see the Netherlands, because it's a state of mind, but it's the investment that's gone into it in the process. But it is all true, but it's my truth. But if you want to wake up in the morning and see something that's ugly, it'll also be your truth. And that's your state of mind. Yeah.
And also to just say something very cliche is that if you haven't put in the effort to walk on top of a mountain, then you won't enjoy the view. And this person that you're talking about hadn't sacrificed anything.
He had bought, well, it's not about sacrifice. He was so disconnected from who he was and what he wanted.
But it's still...
And he didn't even want to be in Vanuatu. He didn't want to be anywhere. He was just trying to impress his kids. That's the wrong way to impress his kids. He was afraid. And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
But it still is a sacrifice of comfort, sacrifice of whatever else you're going to do.
Yeah, but okay, but it's the wealth. Is the wealth something you can buy and purchase, or is it something you have to personally deeply invest in? So going back to
one of the reasons why your works are so beautiful and so wonderful is that you have sacrificed so much to get those works.
Thank you for the compliment. I don't think I've sacrificed. I've organically invested in this journey of understanding. It's nothing but no sacrifice at all. The existence I now have is phenomenal. But I was pushed, or I let myself be pushed into experiencing it in a different way. Yeah.
Did we have someone here? Yeah.
Hi.
Mm-hmm. When my wife and I, we went through Native American traditional ceremonies, and I saw how shamans work.
Mm-hmm.
And the insight for me back then was that traditions there, they're sort of like mental health, healing.
Mm-hmm.
And there I saw what is the purpose of these traditions in this sense, like something that we don't really have in Western culture that much.
Which I think we need, yeah.
So my question is, what were your aha moments, or what were your insights from some cultures? What did you learn seeing their lifestyle?
There are a multitude, thousands of aha moments. They tend not to be related to any form of taking of a natural herb product, substance, alcohol. They tend to be having invested long periods of time in what could be perceived a little bit like my friend in Vanuatu, uncomfortable environments and experiences, and pushing myself through that process to come out of the other side and connect with it. So, for example, if you're working in the northern hemispheres in -40 or -50 degrees centigrade, they are very uncomfortable environments to be in, especially for somebody who comes from comfort. But I was so desperate to honor and understand how the indigenous survive in that environment that I would arrive with a multitude of layers of synthetic clothing, but never be warm, until I let myself become part of the community and then dress as they do in fur. This is a simple way of putting it. So you have to, like an onion, take off all the layers of comfort and perceived wealth and understanding and strip yourself down to the metaphoric nakedness and then rebuild with them. They tend to be experiences like this, physically where you're at your limit, physically where I've invested an enormous amount of period of time, ultimately also for that picture. And again, the picture is the process that I'm pushing myself to make. So another metaphor, story, which I quite like, is I use these big analog cameras. Now, they're very cumbersome. Does everybody know what it is? It's a plate camera. You put a hood over your head and you've got one sheet of film. And I was giving a talk to a whole load of teenagers a while ago, and they were very presumptuous, and one of them said, "Why do you make your life so difficult in the process of making this picture? It can be done a lot easier and quicker." And one of them waved an iPhone around, and all you have to do is spray and pray. Technology is so advanced these days, you don't even have to do it yourself. You can do it on remote, or a drone will do it for you. And then I said to these kids, I said, yeah, but I want to be part of the process. I want to invest in it. I want to make the journey to that picture, to that meeting, as complicated as possible, because only then do you have these aha moments. And the aha moment is this. So I said to these kids, right, if I explained analog photography to them, they won't get it. So I had to make a segue. So I said to this boy, I said, what do you want to feel tomorrow? And he's 16, and his cheeks go red, and he looks at the girl next to him and says, I want to kiss her. So all of a sudden, the whole audience says, yeah, because they're teenagers. So well, let's talk about kissing, okay? And this is building up to your aha moment. There are two ways to kiss. One option is for you tomorrow to go onto the school square and kiss everybody. And everybody says yes. You can spray and pray, metaphorically, with your iPhone. You have to make no effort for it. It just is. Everything is possible. And all the kids are screaming. And I said the other option is about a kiss, but it's about a kiss that is not guaranteed. And it's about one kiss. And that kiss, if it happens, only if, but let's say for the sake of argument you're allowed the kiss, it lasts 1 second. On the last second of the last minute of the last hour of the last day of the last week after 3 months, which would you choose? And they all screamed, spray and pray, spray and pray, spray and pray, as easy as possible and everything as possible. Then the room went silent. They looked at me and I said, yeah, I choose for option B, because I'm not really interested in the kiss anymore. Maybe I've never had the kiss. I'm not interested in that aha moment. It's the process. And the more you invest in the process, the longer the process becomes. And this is a classic cliche. It's the journey. It's not the destination. The destination can be achieved in our society by clicking a finger within seconds. When you let go of that destination, that kiss, that aha moment, and you submit literally at the altar of the process, this is the flow. So then it becomes an unending aha moment. There isn't one, it just is. I have the privilege to carry on and sustain this journey of going further and further and further and further and further, in trying to understand myself, and it's thrilling. And the excuse I use is making a picture, but it's not the picture. And I want to make the ultimate picture, the most beautiful picture that's ever been made. But that won't ever happen, which is okay. But I have to invest everything to pretend to make it happen, to get to these aha moments. Yeah. And you go further and further and further and further and further. Yeah. And then one aha moment happened 2 weeks ago. And it happens all the time. I decided to take my son. I have 3 kids, 26, 22, and 20. My son is 22. He lives in this world. He's an amazing guy. We're close, but he's online 24/7. I said, you have to come with me away. We're going away. We're going away where I'm going to take you to Pakistan. I'm going to do a project in the Middle East in the next few years. I need to do some research in the north, up on the border of Afghanistan. You're coming with me. Pakistan's dangerous. It's full of Taliban and they'll all die. I said, no, you're coming with me. So off we go. The first week he's crying and he's sick and diarrhea and afraid. The second week's transition. The third week we're walking through the mountains with the Taliban. And there's a landslide because we're high up in the mountains. And they jumped on us to protect us. So this is an aha moment. So here's my son. I knew this, I didn't want a landslide to happen, but I knew I was pushing my son and myself into this place of vulnerability, this place of danger, to have this human meeting. So here you are on the border of Afghanistan with people who wear headbands, carrying Kalashnikovs, who we're told are dangerous. We're walking in Mother Nature, the most extraordinary mountains in the planet, and there's a moment where Mother Nature says, we're bigger and stronger than you. And rocks start coming down. And guess what's happened? The most dangerous people on the planet jump on top of us to protect us. This is an aha moment. And my son goes, look what's, and I said, this is why I brought you here. To touch that danger, to get close to that void, to make that journey rich, to feel afraid, to feel vulnerable, and then to better understand the other human beings around us. If you spend the next 50 years at home sitting online, these people wearing headbands carrying Kalashnikovs, instead you've connected with them and the world in a different way. And because we had made the effort to come to their country, we were putting ourselves in a fragile situation. I was on a journey with my son. They honored this. It's a ritual of father and son. Something dangerous started to happen, and all they could think of was protecting us. It was beautiful, beautiful. That's an aha moment. But it has nothing to do with God or with a shaman. It's just to do with putting the ingredients out there and letting it take you in that journey. And there's no picture. It's just an experience between me and my son. Yeah, yeah. And then at the end of the journey, we were sitting on the plane, and it was really fun because I got an automatic upgrade coming back for the first leg. So suddenly he's on connected, and he's all these screens, and he puts them down, and then he looks at me, and he says, I get you. He said, I really get you. I get what you stand for. I get what makes you tick, and I love you in all your eccentricities, in all your inadequacies, in all your complications. Thank you for taking me on this journey. That's an aha moment. So that's a ritual that was created between me and my son, the next generation who's following him. But it has nothing to do with dress or place. It just is trusting and opening yourself up to the world. Yeah. And having amazing experiences. And no pictures. No.
Wow. Did we have someone from over there?
Good question. How do you transform lonely into beautifully lonely? Again, I'll try and come up with an organic. I read a quote earlier today in a magazine on the way here, and it was actually said by Brad Pitt, whether it's profound or not. And he said, and this touched me, he said, it's weird. I feel I'm perpetually in a movie. It's my movie, but I'm the only one who's ever going to watch it. And that's what my life, and I feel a little bit like that. Not to compare myself with Brad Pitt, and I'm not in a movie, but how to connect with that beautiful loneliness is to enjoy, to learn to enjoy, and one's own company, one's own mind, one's own thoughts, one's own face, metaphorically as you look in the mirror. Because I think we're all alone anyway. What goes on inside our head is very subjective. How I perceive the world and how I see it and how I experience it is totally me. No amount of any pictures that I make or any books or any talks, nobody will ever really understand what's going on. But to cherish and enjoy that clarity of thought and that loneliness and acceptance, that's for me, how does one connect to and enjoy that space. Yeah. I think when we are not connected with it, we surround ourselves with noise. And that can be a multitude of things, technological, digital, whatever, or others. And I think you have to connect with that silence and be happy with that silence and with that cacophony of thought. And then if that's aligned a little bit like the feather, then it can become a beautiful experience. So getting more into the place of I'm beginning to accept what I am and how I see the world and how I think as okay. It may not be understood by others, but I understand it, and that's what matters. And then it can become beautiful. Yeah. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Anyone else right now? No? Okay, good.
You see, this has nothing to do with photography.
Have you heard of the concept called Vujavo?
No.
Okay. There is a beautiful, beautiful YouTube channel or a YouTube creator who for years has had a YouTube channel called The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. And he tries to create names for feelings that we don't have names for.
Cool.
And so everyone has heard of déjà vu, but he came up with the term, or coined the term Vujavo. And Vujavo is the term of when you feel something or when you experience something that you know will become a memory at some point. So let's say over the past 2 years, or if you want to take a longer time span, have you experienced something while experiencing it, you knew, oh my God, in 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, I'm going to remember this moment?
Oh, there's so many. So many. Now, which one? I'm trying to think of which one. Oh, so many. I think I have fallen in love and made a connection with another adult for the first time 2 years ago. So this is a love story. So this is maybe to answer the question. I think up until 3 years ago, I did not feel I was valid to give love or be loved by anybody else. And I was trying to align that metaphorically with the feather. And halfway through the pandemic, I was beginning to think, I'm actually worthy to be loved, I think, by one person. Who that is, I don't know. And I'm ready to give it to somebody else. And right in the middle of the pandemic, I was invited to go to Kenya. Everything was locked down. There was one flight. I managed to get myself onto it, and I went with no cameras, with no idea, and I went to visit these people. And one day I was walking down a beach, and there was a lady sitting on the beach, and she was reading a book. And she was a black lady, but she was not the black from that where you could tell she was from a different area. And she was reading a book that was written in English. And it was a book that I recognized. And I've never flirted in my life. I've never chatted anybody up in my life. I never had the confidence. And for the very first time on that beach, in the middle of lockdown, far away in Africa, there's this anonymous woman sitting reading. I walked past and I saw the book. And I thought, this is going to be a first. I'm going to go up and talk to her. As well as that very beautiful lady as well, in every way. And it took me half an hour to get the courage, and I walked down the beach, and I turned around, and I came back up, and I went up and said, that's an amazing book. I've read it as well, and that was the beginning of a conversation. At that particular moment in time, I knew this was going to be special. And I'll extend the story. It was great. So we talked for 4 days. Nothing happened. There was no taking pictures. There was no kissing. And for the next 4 months, she was writing a book, traveling down the east coast of Africa. She's of Senegalese descent, but born in Paris, so she's French. And she decided to rediscover the continent of her parents' origin and write a book traveling in the middle of the pandemic down the east coast of Africa. For the very first time in my life, I was in lockdown in the Netherlands. I was not traveling, but every day she was sending me films of her journey, of how she was connecting with the people she met, with the planet, as a very adventurous, very brave woman. And in those 4 months, I fell in love with her. Not in the way she looked, not in the way she smelled, not in the way she kissed, none of which I knew, but in the way she told stories, and in the way she connected with the world. And I thought for the very first time, here's somebody who sees the world and the people in it the way I see it. Then the silver lining on the story was, 4 months later, she said, I'm in Mozambique if you're in the neighborhood by any chance, do you fancy dinner? Now, this was still in lockdown. So I managed to create because I didn't want to tell this to anybody, a fake appointment in Johannesburg. So I said to my colleagues, I have to go and see the curator of a museum in Johannesburg. And they said, yeah, but the world is shut. I said, yeah, but it's a very important appointment. I have to go. So I went on a blind date, essentially, down to Johannesburg, got on a plane down to Maputo on the border of, and this lady was standing at the airport. And that was the beginning of a journey which we're still on today. But I knew that moment on the beach when I saw her reading the book. And why it was so profound, I felt that finally I was valid and I could open up that door to that source, that flow. That was one of the elements that was missing in my life, to find a kindred spirit, somebody who saw the world not like the man in Vanuatu, like I did it, and to share that experience. So, if that's an answer to the question. And there are a multitude of others, but that's a very beautiful
It was a very beautiful answer. It would have been a great twist if it would turn out that now you're together with the man from Vanuatu. That would...
Yes, also a possibility, yeah.
But we only have a few minutes left, so we do have to wrap up, unfortunately. But maybe to start the wrap up, can you tell us how come did you end up in Estonia again, and what are your plans for the future, for the next few years?
It's a good bridge and an important bridge. This is also going to be a love story. I was given the privilege and the opportunity to have the opening exhibition of my work here in Fotografiska 3 years ago. 3 years ago. It was because it was a new museum, because you were a country hungry for new content, new opportunity, new stories. It became a very reciprocal experience. I had one of the most wonderful experiences. And I vowed with the people who had manifested the exhibition, one day we will do something together. We've been tentatively talking over the last few years, and we are going to manifest an exclusive project in Estonia next year. I will spend a considerable period of time here looking for that kiss, hopefully with a small group of young, creative photographers, storytellers, and we are going to try and succeed in aesthetically putting Estonia on the map culturally in its humanity, to share it with you and with the rest of the world. So that's why I'm here, to manifest spending more time in a country that is not that well internationally known. And it's also the catalyst for a bigger project, which will be on Europe. And Estonia will be the first part of it. So that's why I'm here.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so I'm also here for me, not just for you. No.
Beautiful.
So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
Okay, I think I can ask one last question, right? We have time enough for that. They promised if we go 10 minutes over, this is perfect. Okay, so most people know what they want, right? Like kind of, in a way.
I hope.
Like immediately.
You should aspire.
But
to
lately, I don't know who I got it from, but there is a very important question that we don't ask often, which is, what do we want to want? And maybe starting from everything that has been going on for the past 2 years, what should we want to want?
I think we should want to let go and stop thinking about ourselves and realize that we will soon be leaving this planet, and I don't mean this in a dark way. And we want that the planet becomes this beautifully sustainable church that will enable all human beings after us to sustain themselves happily here. That's what we should want. And we should let go of what we want as an individual and all come back together and try and manifest that. Because in a very short period of time, I've gone, and the multitude of generations after us will follow us. But if we don't all come together as a whole and want a healthier planet, we're not in big trouble, because we'll be gone in a second. But the human beings that follow us will be, and it's a pity for them, because life can be very beautiful and very rich. That's what I would want to want.
Beautiful. I would like to thank everybody. Thank you everybody for very beautiful questions. Well done, wonderful. Thank you, Jimmy. We will be talking to Jimmy tomorrow at the Paide Arvamus Festival also. So whoever is not there, it will be filmed also. So it should be available for viewing very soon. And if anybody wants, I think we should have posters in the store of Jimmy's. So if anybody wants to purchase them, then we have Jimmy here, and he will write love letters, poems, jokes, whatever you want on them, hopefully.
Yeah.
And I guess that's it. Is there anything else I have to mention? No? Beautiful. So thank you, everybody.
And thank you for the very good questions 2 years ago today, and I look forward to tomorrow. And thank you so much for listening and for your patience.
Beautiful. Thank you.